By Friday evening, the healing woman moved like someone wearing an invisible weight. The kind of weight that doesn't come from one bad day but from a stretch of too many long shifts back to back, where her body was always moving and her spirit always retreating. Work had been relentless, shoulder deep in a storm of orders, noise, clatter, and smiling at people who never looked her in the eye. 3 doubles in 5 days had hollowed her out. Her lower back throbbed. Her calves were still sore from standing for hours. Her neck tightened every time she breathed too deeply. But the greatest ache wasn't muscular. It was the ache of being overstimulated and underseen, of giving too much and having nothing left when the shift finally ended. But tonight she wasn't going back tomorrow, or the day after that. For the first time all week, she could inhale without mentally preparing for another 12-hour shift. She didn't have to speak unless she wanted to. She didn't have to clean up after anyone else. She had 2 full days ahead of her with no customer demands, no trays, no false cheer. Just space. And for her, that space meant getting far away. Her son was home already, backpack on the floor, a pair of socks hanging off the couch arm like a flag of comfort. He looked up from his phone and met her eyes with quiet attention. He knew the week had taken its toll on her. He'd seen it before. He didn't ask questions. He just said, "Do you want to go?" And it was enough. They packed lightly but with purpose. Her camera, 2 bottles of water, a spare hoodie for each of them, and a few protein bars tucked into the side pocket. She tied her boots with slow determination, feeling the stiffness in her legs as she rose. It wasn't the easy excitement of adventure. It was the kind of movement that said, "I need this to feel like myself again." Instead of heading toward their usual trail, the one with the marsh, the lake, and her beloved meadow, they drove north. The farther location had more wooded terrain, rising hills and streams that twisted through stone and moss. She'd heard the trails there were too many to cover in one day, and that's exactly what appealed to her now. She didn't need something she could finish. She needed to get lost in something bigger than herself. They arrived at the trailhead just as the sun began its descent behind the treeline, casting long bands of orange and gold across the gravel lot. The light slanted low between the trees, brushing the forest with a kind of reverent hush. Only one other car remained, its occupants likely already deep into the woods or on their way out. The air had that clean, sharp scent of pine and damp soil, threaded with the sweetness of decaying leaves. It was cooler here than at home, and with each step toward the trailhead, she could feel a layer of tension begin to slide off her back. The trail started gently enough, weaving between wide trunks and sloping upward at a steady incline. The terrain wasn't punishing, but it demanded attention. She could feel her thighs tighten with effort and her breath catch slightly as they crested the first small rise. Her body, still carrying the fatigue of the week, resisted at first, but her heart welcomed the movement. For the first time in days, her surroundings weren't demanding anything of her. The woods didn't need her to serve, to smile, or to solve anything. She could simply exist among trees and soil and shadow. Her son walked beside her, matching her pace without speaking much. He moved easily, hands in the pockets of his hoodie, occasionally pausing to point out a woodpecker's distant drumming or a faint trail marker nailed to an old maple. He didn't ask if she was okay. He didn't try to fix anything. He just stayed close, which was its own form of healing. As they rounded a bend, the sound of moving water reached them, first as a whisper, then as a clearer melody of rushing current. They followed the path as it dipped into a hollow, where a mountain stream carved a silver line through the undergrowth. The stream wasn't wide, but it was swift, slipping around smooth stones, tumbling over roots and shallow ledges. It gleamed in the fading light, catching every sunbeam like a thread in motion. The woman paused to sit on a boulder near the bank, catching her breath and letting her boots cool in the shade. Her muscles still ached, but something deeper inside her, something emotional, quiet, and worn, began to loosen. She tilted her head and closed her eyes, listening to the water, the wind through the leaves, and the way the forest exhaled without rush. That's when they saw the beavers. Just ahead, the stream narrowed where branches had been gathered and layered. Half a dam, still under construction. Several beavers were already at work. One dragged a long sapling through the shallows, weaving it into the others with its teeth. Another paddled across the pool that had already begun to form behind the structure, its brown head and slicked back forming ripples in the glassy water. They were astonishingly calm. The beavers worked without glancing at the humans watching them. Not with fear, not with indifference. It was more like acknowledgement, as if these two weary visitors had been expected. She crouched beside her son at the water's edge, her camera resting lightly in her hands, but for several long moments she didn't raise it. Instead, she watched. She watched the efficiency, the steadiness, the patience in each movement. There was no panic here, no urgency. The beavers worked without audience or applause, building something that made the stream more habitable. The metaphor didn't need explaining. It settled into her like warmth. Eventually, she took a few quiet photos. Nothing posed, nothing perfect. Just the still water, the half-built dam, the curve of her son's shoulder as he leaned forward to see. They whispered about what they were watching, marveling at the way nature made space for its own resilience. The moment stretched, unmeasured and unhurried, until the sky above them began to shift into lavender tones. They rose slowly and walked on, choosing a different trail that dipped lower through a grove of younger trees. The trail curved and wove like thread through a quilt, the hills rising again in long, gentle swells. Her legs were tired, but they didn't hurt in the same way anymore. The pain of labor had been replaced by the burn of purpose, the kind that didn't drain her, but returned her to herself. The sun fell fully behind the hills as they reached the car again, and the forest faded into soft blue shadow. The temperature had dropped, and the stars began to prick through the sky above them like tiny compass points. Her son slid into the passenger seat and leaned his head against the window, arms folded, relaxed in a way that mirrored her own. She sat for a moment before starting the engine, her fingers resting on the wheel, her mind quiet. She was still physically exhausted. No magical second wind had appeared, but her spirit no longer felt frayed. The sharp edges of her week had dulled. The weight she carried didn't disappear, but it had become lighter, redistributed across her bones by the rhythm of trails, the whisper of streams, and the unwavering patience of creatures who didn't fear her presence. There would be Monday again soon, but not yet. Tonight she had the hills. She had her son. She had the cold stream and the animals that welcomed her without expectation. And for the first time all week, she felt whole inside her own skin.